yesterday, I started to speak about this information in this article on Lion's Roar that said some Buddhist teachers are not only turning towards psychedelics in their practice, but also making it a part of their teaching. So I talked a bit about some of my ideas, and I wanted to go through some of the things that people said in the article so you could get some idea of that, and I may comment on it. So there's this one teacher from Spirit Rock, okay, who offers guided meditation sessions, compassion and loving kindness practices, and other foundational Buddhist teachings. So it seems like for people who are at the beginning of the path. And on 8 of the 14 evenings in this series, under her care and the direction of a Peruvian healer, a group of 20 retreatants drink ayahuasca, yeah, the psychoactive, sorry, well, maybe both. The psychoactive brew made from a vine that grows in the heart of the Amazon rainforest. The group then meditates under the influence of ayahuasca for the next 5 to 8 hours. Okay. And then it says from Colorado to California, North Carolina to New York and beyond, Buddhist practitioners are gathering to experiment with and discuss the merits of consciousness-altering substances in the context of their Dharma practice. Okay. So lots of people have been talking about it, and one person who's the executive director of Insight LA said, "We know that psychedelics are a valid doorway to Dharma practice. It was in the 1960s and still is today, and now there is a renaissance of use." So, door to Dharma practice, if that means that sometimes, you know, like in my generation, you took psychedelics and then you got more interested in the mind and spirituality, yes, that happened. But if door to Dharma practice means that it leads you to practice the Dharma, or it is a step in your Dharma practice, then I have some doubts about that. So then it talks about medical research, you know, and they talk about the number of researchers, doctors, and therapists who believe psychedelic therapy will soon be routine and widely available in the form of a novel hybrid of pharmacology and psychotherapy. So like I said yesterday, if professionals, you know, research this and it comes out to be a valid therapy, you know, which I'm not going to comment on, you know, and people do it under the guidance of professionals, that's one thing. But bringing it in and making it part of Buddhist practice is a whole other ballgame, which I don't think should be done. Okay, so all these researchers, they've seen that psilocybin, MDMA or ecstasy, and LSD have had positive results in treating alcohol and nicotine addiction, obsessive compulsive behaviors, cancer, distress, depression, anxiety, and PTSD, including amongst military veterans. Okay, you know, okay. Then, but those who are pushing the boundaries of Dharma and psychedelics are, for the most part, Generation X teachers and millennials. So those are going to be people in their 30s and 40s, is my guess. Okay. And so they frequently write, there's one guy who frequently writes on the intersection of Buddhism, psychedelics, and Americana. What's Americana? Ah, okay. says, we are witnessing a youthquake within Buddhism, a changing of the guard of teachers following the decline of the hippie baby boomers. What about our Asian teachers? Yeah, is Buddhism in the West only from hippie baby boomers? This new generation of teachers is comfortable with being both Buddhists and consciousness hackers using non-Buddhist means. Okay, so then one of them wrote a guidebook called Meditating on Psychedelics, a Simple Ceremony, for students and friends who had been asking for guidance in combining their meditation practice with the use of psychedelic substances such as ayahuasca, psilocybin, peyote mescaline, and large doses of cannabis. Yeah, I wonder if these people know. I got through college. I had to work my way through college the last 2 years. And I did that. I worked on 2 marijuana research projects, paid ones, and then my own marijuana research. So it was very, interesting. Okay, then this other teacher a Westerner who just completed 2 traditional 3-year Tibetan Buddhist meditation retreats, has written an account of his experiences with ayahuasca in the Amazon and how it might be understood from the perspective of a Vajrayana initiation. And last year, a prominent Vajrayana teacher convened a gathering in Portland called Dzogchen and Psychedelics to explore whether psychotropics could play a role in sadhana practice, with particular value as either initiator, expanding one's consciousness to see beyond conventional reality, or as obstacle destroyer, in other words, protector along the path. Even the old guard is taking note of this development, recognizing the new generation's skill in working with psychedelics and the advances in their therapeutic use. Insight meditation teacher Jack Cornfield, speaking last year at a Spirit Rock conference titled At the Intersection, Psychedelics and the Buddhist Path, opined that the new generation of Western Buddhist teachers is on the cusp of something revolutionary. I'd say it's revolutionary. But, Cornfield cautioned, it has to be done carefully and with the boundaries that the Buddha offered regarding ethics, not to harm yourself and not to harm others. I guess taking intoxicants doesn't apply to his version of ethics. Okay, then somebody else said, we take these substances which we consider medicine as a kind of sacrament with aspirations of healing ourselves so that we can more effectively be of service throughout the world. It is not a recreational drug. Ayahuasca is a powerful medicine. It heals, it should be honored and respected. Then do it in a medical setting, not at a Dharma center. Okay. So when this teacher does, this is the one who teaches at Spirit Rock, when she does ayahuasca retreat, the ambience is a traditional shamanic ceremony in the Peruvian jungle. That's the setting. This is not only because ayahuasca is legal in Peru and understood as a medicine to heal the body and mind, including trauma, but also because she sees this as the safest and most supportive environment. Okay, and so I don't know if that means that they decorate the hall like a Peruvian jungle or move take in those rituals. It doesn't explain it here. Okay, but they say they experience a sense of interconnectedness that is beyond words. It's a powerful shift in the way we view ourselves in the world. Is it going to enlighten us? No, that is not the job of ayahuasca. Its job is to help us wake up. We still have to do the work of being ethical, working with our heart and mind, and serving others. So that last part corresponds with Buddhism, but yeah, I'm not sure how you put those two together. Okay, then there's somebody creating a documentary. Okay, this is one other teacher with a group of up to 40 meditators who ingest psychotropic substance psilocybin. Okay, so-and-so includes footage in their documentary of students approaching their teacher at the shrine, receiving a bag of mushrooms to eat, and then bowing before the Buddha before returning to their zafus. Listen to this one. In Vajrayana Sanghas in Oregon, Colorado, and Washington, D.C., practitioners are using psychedelic substances during sok offerings, what they call tantric feast offerings, including mixing psilocybin into the torma, the sacrificial cake that is ritually offered to the deities and later eaten by the practitioners. Some practitioners ingest mushrooms or LSD before the liturgy begins, so the full effects of the substances can be felt throughout the entirety of the practice. One Vajrayana practitioner in Boulder described placing one drop of LSD from a tincture into the kapala on the shrine as an offering and another in her mouth. She said the substance helps remove her habitual deluded ways of seeing herself in the world. Another practitioner in Virginia said mushrooms help him in the generation stage of visualizing deities in the form of light. I bet it does. Whoa, I'm sure it does. As well as in the dissolution stage of resting in the spacious clarity of mind. That one I'm not sure about. Okay, so, but apart from running afoul of the law, because these things are illegal, can you imagine being at a Dharma center that gets busted for doing this? Then there's often the often reported bad trip in which one experiences panic attacks or intense terror, albeit temporary. However, several fatalities have also occurred during the ayahuasca retreats in South America. Okay. And they also pose particular dangers for those recovering from substance abuse. So one person says, that they have an addictive mind, so they don't go near it. And somebody else stresses that if a Dharma practitioner wants to work with psychedelics, it should be done in a therapeutic setting. Things can be revealed on psychedelics from your subconscious. You are thrown all over the place in that journey, and people don't know what to do with all of that. Yeah, for sure. People with latent psychosis or schizophrenia or those who have ever had suicidal thoughts should not take these substances outside of a clinical setting. Sometimes you don't know if somebody's schizophrenic or psychotic until they take the substances. Yeah. Then one Dzogchen teacher said psychedelics can provide an opportunity for synchronicious moments of full recognition of the nature of the mind. Why didn't the Buddha tell us all to do that then? Yeah, if this is so great. But he went on to note that even though the clarity and unbounded spaciousness of the nature of the mind may unfold while on psychedelics, the challenge is that it is almost always accompanied by an onslaught of visionary, hallucinogenic, and otherwise psychedelic phenomena. In other words, you lose your awareness of the clarity of the mind because you're tripping. Okay. Then somebody else says psychedelics can greatly enhance the ego. Experiences on these plant medicines can definitely supercharge your personal samsara in ways that you can believe are deeply liberating. Some people go from one so-called liberating experience to another. Sound familiar? Effectively running in circles while constantly telling all their friends how profoundly life-changing it all is. Okay, then another Western teacher of Tibetan Buddhism says, don't get involved in psychedelics unless you are willing to have your most deeply held beliefs about you and your world not only questioned, but also shown to have no basis. Actually, if you don't want to investigate that, you shouldn't be involved in the Dharma. Yeah? Your belief systems are constructed by thoughts. Psychedelics are like a solvent poured on your beliefs. You may watch all of that dissolve. And although dissolving belief structures is the ultimate point of the Dharma, doing so with psychedelics is not for every practitioner. And this is why, when we learn the gradual path, such a big part of it is purification and accumulation of merit, because we have to really prepare the mind. If you could take psychedelics and see the nature of the mind, or you do your sadhanas in incredible living color, that's one thing. But if your mind isn't prepared to have those experiences, then the result is not going to be good. It's going to be fearful. It's going to, it's not going to work. And so that's why, like I said, we have to do so much purification, so much creation of merit in our practice. It isn't just about diving in and doing the highest, most exotic practices. That's not it. Then Achan Suchito, former abbot of Chittaviveka Monastery, so one of our Theravada friends, said, psychedelics don't get the mind to bring forth its strengths, virtues, warmth, or discernment. Hooray! Instead, the mind is rendered passive. They do indicate that the reality constructed by the senses is just that, a kind of spell that we're born under. But they don't reveal how that spell is cast or how to come out of it. In fact, they cast another spell, the spell of a shift in perception. Okay? So it isn't about just seeing the nature of the mind and whammo. It's, my ordinary view. How did that get created? And then you have to go into the 12 links and understand ignorance, understand karma and afflictions, look at your own mind and how your own mind creates your samsara. Yeah. And then you have to learn how to see through that using reasoning, not just by having another experience that seems better than your ordinary experience. Yeah. So having said that, I did say yesterday that in my own personal research, when I was younger, I did have some quite good insights, but it's not us seeing necessarily seeing with our own wisdom. And it's not necessarily something that we can have again in our meditation because it came as a result of an external force, not as a result of our own mental training. Okay. So then somebody, towards the end of the article, they bring up whether it's indeed a form of intoxication and that their use therefore violates both the letter and spirit of the fifth precept. So one, Achan Suchito said, psychedelics, I reckon psychedelics to be less harmful than alcohol, but essentially they make my mind lazy. It took about 5 years of training in attention, patience, and emotional resilience to clear the major effects of a comparable period of drug use. And it took longer still to come out of the notion that what counts is what the mind sees, its content, rather than what it does, its hanging on to or relinquishment of discrimination and consciousness. Okay, so this I think is a quite interesting statement. Is our spiritual practice about seeing things, the content of the mind, or is it about understanding how the mind works and giving up our grasping and our attachment? Okay, so the content of the mind versus the process or what the mind does. Yeah. Are we just trying to substitute in our practice some better content? Or are we trying to undo the whole structure? Yeah, of how the mind has been working. Okay, then somebody else was saying the traditional Buddhist practices are not getting at the relational role of identities all of us get stuck in. But psychedelics do. I wonder what they've been practicing, because the relational identities, I don't know, to me it's a major part. Then one Zen teacher said, I wonder about the influence of our culture in terms of seeking very powerful experiences, hoping that those experiences are going to save us. Right on. People are looking for shortcuts, even in Buddhism. They want to expedite the path, and some are hoping psychedelics will do that. But those influences are so pervasive in our culture that it merits being cautious. And then the teacher from the beginning at Spirit Rock said, but we see longtime students not growing anymore after their initial opening to the Dharma many years ago. Okay, and so drugs will help you get beyond if you're kind of getting stuck in your practice. Okay, then somebody else says, the path of Buddha leads us to an unnameable place. Psychedelics have the capacity to do that as well, albeit in a more forceful way. In both cases, we may arrive at an indescribable place where we realize we cannot say anything definite about anything. That in itself is a type of freedom. Where you can't say anything definite about anything. Yeah, I mean, I think what he means is that you get out of your stuck conceptions, but you still have to be able to say something definite, within a certain context. Otherwise, you're just kind of lost. Anyway, that's some of the things coming out of the article that I thought it would be interesting that people needed to be aware of.
So just commenting on the fact they're meditating for 5 to 8 hours while on this ayahuasca. There was an article online from a fellow who titled his article, I wish someone had told me these 5 things before I went on my first ayahuasca thing. So I'll read it very quickly. During my retreat, I took part in 4 ayahuasca ceremonies, each one being radically different from the next. The first was spent in utter nausea, purging in a mental state I can only describe as a mixture between a haunted house and a madhouse. The second was the most transformative event of my life, as I was taken on the most beautiful journey of enlightenment I could have asked for. The third session, I was brought back to the gates of hell, purging for 6 straight hours. In another article, they have buckets with them on these journeys, so there's a lot of throwing up. Is this meditation? By the 4th ceremony, a portion of the group didn't even make it, as we were absolutely shattered by this point. I forced myself to drink, but to my surprise, nothing happened. Then there was another website about the risks of this kind of drug, the specific one. And so there's a risk with interactions with prescription drugs, so who would know what you're taking at the time? Mm-hmm. And there's something called a serotonin syndrome, which is very, very dangerous. And then under normal circumstances, this enzyme also breaks down tyramine found in pork, pickles, smoked and fermented foods, chocolate and alcoholic drinks. Excess tyramine can trigger a dangerous spike in blood pressure. So if you don't know who's leading you, you're in big trouble.
Yeah. When I was in high school, hallucinogens were the drug of choice for some of my people I hung out with, including my boyfriend who dropped acid a couple hundred times. And I also had another friend who did a lot of acid. And I can tell you from watching those people, I didn't partake maybe a dozen times in my life, but watching people who did this a lot, this is not good for your physiology. Mm-hmm. If you've met people who have done a lot of acid, they don't function so well in society. They make some really poor decisions that could kill them, including my friend Glenn, who's going to hitchhike in the middle of winter with a light jacket on from Michigan to Texas. And, I mean, it was just scary. And this isn't unusual. Anyone who grew up in my generation and knew people who did this met people who, we used to say they fried their brain.
Yeah.
That was the expression. And we've met people who have done that. Mm-hmm. So I think that... the thing about just seeking peak experiences is what I mostly put this under, and I think it's really a wrong view about what Dharma practice is supposed to be about.
Really function in a conventional way much anymore. I think that also the ayahuasca can be very dangerous. Not only have people died on it, there's people that aren't, it's like they've taken a lot of acid. They're that same way where they're difficulties functioning day to day. And we can't make up our own path. We see lots of different things that people try and bring into Buddhism that really degenerated age. Yeah, where people are bringing in crazy ideas of what they think Tantra is, or it is this peak experience thing. And it's really not good for Buddhism overall and for the practitioners that are doing it usually.
I say, I think it was understandable in the 60s and 70s when people weren't familiar with Eastern cultures and Eastern spirituality and, indigenous cultures and how they used intoxicants and did different practices to expand the mind. But we've had 50, 60 years of experience with all of this, and authentic Dharma teachers have really made headway in the West, published lots of books, giving teachings continuously. So I think it's really surprising that this sort of ignorance that kind of mishmashes all of these different spiritual practices is coming back into play. And it shows that the Dharma, maybe the authentic Dharma, hasn't really fully taken root yet. And there still needs to be a lot of education about what is authentic spiritual practice and what is just, like everyone's saying, wishing to have these experiences. And it all goes back to, I think our culture really doesn't understand what the mind is. And so these different practices that deal with the mind and have you exploring the mind, people are still unable to tell what's going to lead to good experiences and what's not going to lead to any lasting transformation. So our culture also, I think it has to do with this lack of understanding of what is the mind.
It's about the fact that the indigenous people of the Amazon basin for centuries practiced their own form of religion, and within that context, the use of certain substances was required. It was part of their culture. It was part of how they view themselves in relationship to nature. And I think within that culture, we should respect that. We should. What I find objectionable or confusing is to bring those practices out of that context where it makes sense, that where it was used with certain parameters, and then bring it out of that and try to adopt it within a different context, different parameters, and totally taking out of its original, its original purpose. So, and in a place that it doesn't fit. So, anyway, that was just my comment.